Welcome to Lights Camera Author. I'm Jim Juno. This is where we talk with the writers who take us behind the scenes of the books that explore the people, films, and stories that shaped popular culture. From the silent era to the age of television, Alfred Hitchcock transformed the way audiences experience suspense. He made us afraid of ordinary places, a shower, a motel, a suburban home, a flock of birds. And my guest today is film critic and scholar David Sterritt, and he is the author of the newly revised and expanded edition of the Films of Alfred Hitchcock. The book is published by Columbia University Press, and it revisits Hitchcock's extraordinary career while expanding the original edition with new materials. And David, I want to welcome you to Lights Camera Author.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I tell you what, this book it retains the original foundation, but like we got to let people know, this originally came out in 1993.
Yeah.
33 years ago.
Hmm.
But now you've returned to Hitchcock with a revised and expanded edition. So what brought you back to the book?
When the book first came out in 1993, it was published by Cambridge University Press, and it did very well for this kind of book. And they wanted to do a second edition right away. And I just didn't have time. I was just too involved in too many other things. So I never did it, and I never did it, and I never did it. And it stayed in my mind. It would have been nice to do that. And I've done a whole lot of books since then, including even another book on Hitchcock. But finally, I thought to myself, oh, I don't remember, maybe a couple of years ago, the time has really come to see if I can get this thing going. Well, Cambridge doesn't do so much in the way of film books anymore. So I went to Columbia University Press, which published my book on Clint Eastwood a few years ago. And they have an imprint called Wallflower Press, and they were interested. So I had, various pieces of new material that were right ready to hand, which is to say, I had written them for some other purpose and they could easily be adapted into a chapter of the book. The book is basically a series of essays. I hope there's some continuity to it. And the essays, the chapters are in alphabetical order, not alphabetical, I'm in chronological order. Yeah. That was it. So I just sort of put those in and tried to smooth the whole thing out to make a graceful, I hope, a whole. And then I had my revised and expanded edition. And of course, I went back over all the chapters that I published back in 1993 and polished them up and smoothed them out and maybe corrected some things here and there. So that's how it came about.
And you've expanded on the chapters. Well, you also included chapters like From Capricorn and Family Plot,
Yeah.
and expanded on Rope and Marnie.
Mhm.
And so why were those films particularly important to revisit?
Well, different reasons in every case. For example, the chapter on Under Capricorn, because I wrote that for a conference on Hitchcock that I was at a few years ago, and I thought, that's a movie that just doesn't get all that much attention. And in fact, this was a whole conference devoted to Under Capricorn, so that may be changing. And I don't think it's one of Hitchcock's greatest films, but
Yeah.
it's a really interesting film in all kinds of ways. So I just thought, well, it's an under-recognized film, an understudied film, an under-critiqued film. So I'll include that chapter as well. And I think it serves a certain purpose. Let me mention a couple of the purposes that I hope it serves. One is that in Rope, which is, yeah, I greatly expanded my work on rope to put that chapter into the new book as well. Rope, Hitchcock tried a really bold technical experiment, the idea of shooting the whole movie in long takes so that every shot, which is to say the camera running continuously, every shot would last, oh, not 10 minutes long because the camera would only hold 10 minutes worth of film, but up to 10 minutes long. So you have this whole movie with only a few edits, only a few cuts, and most of those are disguised, so you're not supposed to notice them. So that was a bold experiment. Hitchcock thought it was going to change filmmaking forever. It didn't work very well. Hitchcock is one of the great masters of film editing, one of the great masters of montage. The shower murder in Psycho is one of the greatest montage sequences ever done. So why Hitchcock would have tried to experiment making a whole movie with no visible edits in it? Well, he did it. and he tried it and it didn't work. But he tried it again in Under Capricorn, and there it already wasn't working almost immediately. And so he decided to pretty much get rid of it. But there is still a couple of beautiful long takes, shots that go on and on with the camera moving and reframing and stuff like that in Under Capricorn. So it's a movie that sort of showed Hitchcock trying the experiment of rope in a slightly different way. And for that reason, it's of sort of technical interest. Then also it's a story takes place in the past. Hitchcock very often said that he didn't like making period pictures, costume pictures, because with the people wearing those old-fashioned clothes, he used to say he could never imagine how they went to the bathroom. So, it's rare. He did it a few times, but it's rare for him to make a period movie, and Under Capricorn is one of those. Also, it takes place on the other side of the world. It takes place in Australia, as the story indicates. So, a whole lot of reasons for including that, but I would say the main one being that it's an understudied film, a movie that has not been talked about all that much.
One of the fascinating things about your book is that you're not only cataloging Hitchcock's films, but you're trying to identify what makes a Hitchcock film Hitchcockian.
Yeah.
And you describe one of the central tensions is the conflict between work and chaos.
Mhm.
Why do you think the conflict between or order and chaos is
Order.
so
Yeah.
fundamental?
Well, first of all, I think that that is an underlying theme of artworks going back thousands and thousands of years. I think that always the creation of a work of art is an attempt to bring some kind of order to the, let's say, the disorder, the unruliness, and often the chaos of everyday life. So that's one of the things that art does. And I do truly believe that Hitchcock was a very, very great artist. Not every work of art succeeded, but he was a very great and profound even artist. So that's one thing. Then Hitchcock being very interested, partly for personal reasons and also eventually for commercial reasons, interested in themes of disorder, of disorder in life. He obviously made a lot of movies about crime, about murder, about violence, that kind of thing. Not every single movie, but starting pretty early in his career, he decided that the kind of film that best suited his own impulses, his own talents, his own interests were suspense movies. And suspense movies have to have some element of disorder or chaos
Mhm.
so that there's something to be suspenseful about. So but then when you make a movie, you have to, and especially a commercial mainstream movie, you have to make a work that has its own order that audiences can come to and can see and can experience and not have to work really, really hard to get it. And so, therefore, you are bringing order of a particular kind, in this case, a cinematic kind, a movie kind, to the chaotic raw material of crime, violence, suspense, all the things that interested him most.
Um, he often referred to something called the double MacGuffin. Why is that so important to Hitchcock's work?
I'm not sure what a double MacGuffin is. I know that he was very interested in doubles and he was very interested in MacGuffins. Let me start with the MacGuffin, a famous thing in Hitchcock. The MacGuffin is something that the characters really care a lot about, and it keeps the story going and gives the characters something to run around and do. The audience couldn't care less what it is. The characters are the ones who care. So I'll just give one example. In North by Northwest, there's all this confused identity and people traveling all over the United States and people shooting at each other and this and that and the other thing. And what is it all about? We find out it's about a piece of microfilm. What's on the microfilm? Who knows?
Who
Who
knows?
cares? It doesn't matter to us in the audience. It really matters to the people in the movie. So it's all about that piece of microfilm. It's important to them what's on it. We don't have to know. And there's example after example after example of that in Hitchcock's work. Then the other term you mentioned, the double, Hitchcock, for some reason or other, was fascinated with doubles, and they show up again and again and again in his movies. The idea of two characters who have something in common with each other, but also contrast with each other. It could be as simple in some cases as a blonde woman and a brunette woman. He loved his blondes, but there was very often there a brunette to balance things out. But then you have a movie like Strangers on a Train, where you have two men who decide, well, one of them decides they're going to exchange murders. If I murder somebody you really don't like, nobody will ever catch me because I have no connection to that person. And then in exchange, you murder somebody who I really dislike. Well, since one of the people never really agrees to this and doesn't even like the whole idea, it turns into a crazy thing. But you have basically this one psychotic character who sets this whole thing up, and another very upright character who does, however, harbor in him seeds of great dislike for one particular person. So you have that doubling theme. And you have doubles in Hitchcock over and over and over again. There's just countless examples of it. And he just, for some reason, was fascinated with it. One of his great movies of the 1950s, The Wrong Man, is about a man who is accused of a crime he never committed and spends pretty much the whole movie trying to break free of this accusation and prove his innocence. And all the time, there's somebody else who is guilty. Well, we only see that other guilty person at the very end of the movie, but we have that doubling in a different way here. We have the one person who is really upright, and then another person we never see who is really criminal, and they are mistaken for each other throughout pretty much the whole movie. And let me mention one more, Shadow of a Doubt, where you have two characters named Charlie. You have Uncle Charlie, a sweet guy who comes to visit his family in California. He's from the East. And then you have his niece, a young woman whose name is also Charlie. So there you have doublets, but they are very different. It turns out that the sweet uncle who comes to visit is actually a serial killer. And young Charlie, his young woman niece, uh, finds this out, but she can't release this information. She can't like call the cops because it would kill her mother, who loves her brother very, very much. So that's another big Hitchcock theme, the transference of guilt from one person to another. But there we have another case of doubles. One really evil person, another really innocent and sweet person who is not completely innocent, and they have the same name, and they are very close to each other in some ways, and they're exact opposites in others. So a great example of the Hitchcock double.
He also used contrasting colors like black and white. And the two films that come to my mind is Strangers on a Train, where there's a scene where the one player is playing tennis. And
Mhm.
in this crowd, a sea of white, there is one black individual, I mean one
Yeah,
individual wearing
yeah,
black,
yeah, yeah.
who's the bad guy. And then in Psycho, you know, Janet Leigh initially is wearing white lingerie, but after she decides to steal the money, the
Yeah,
lingerie switches to black.
yep.
So he used that quite often, didn't he? That contrast.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and also in his use of color, not just black and white. He was very, very meticulous about his color schemes, and in what many people, probably including me, consider his greatest film, Vertigo. There's just
Oh,
an amazing use of color in that movie, perhaps climaxing when another case of doubles here, because we have a woman impersonating another woman, and well, all kinds of things happen there. It's a complicated plot. But when finally one of the main characters, played by James Stewart, is trying to refashion this woman he just met into the image of a woman who he believes has died. And when he finally has that refashion, he's like a movie director. He gives her the costume, he puts her hair in the right way, and when she finally emerges from her dressing room completely in the image that he had caused her to take on. She's bathed in this ghostly green glow because it is like the dead woman who he loved, he thinks is dead, having come back to life. And she looks like a ghost. And it's all done with this ghostly green color around her. So, and that's just one out of a million different examples of Hitchcock using color in very, very deliberate ways.
well, we talk about Vertigo, and like you said, it's a film about obsession and identity, guilt, and deception. And do you see Vertigo as primarily a psychological tragedy, or is Hitchcock reaching for something more spiritual, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, very interesting question. Well, I have to say, I guess sort of both. I mean, it is certainly it's a melodrama, and the plot, once you start to think about it, is really implausible. It's a big stretch that some of these things could happen. It's regarded by many, many people as Hitchcock's greatest film, and up until recently, it would place as number one in the British Film Institute poll of greatest films ever made. So
Hmm.
that's how respected it is. And yet, Again, the plot really kind of doesn't make any sense. You have to overlook certain implausibilities along the way. But it's a melodrama. It's definitely a suspense movie. It's a movie about the things you just mentioned. It's about obsession. It's about identity. It's about all these different things. But the thing is that Hitchcock, it's not, I think, so much a question of whether he's reaching for something greater, perhaps more spiritual, than that's where his intuitions bring him. And I think that Vertigo is absolutely a film where he is thinking about profound things. He's thinking about identity, for example, in a very, very deep way. What does it really mean to be a particular person? What does it really mean to misconstrue what another person is? That kind of thing. And then also, I felt more and more in recent years that there's a kind of a religious dimension. You mentioned spirituality that is very important in Hitchcock. And again, is starting to get, I think, some of the attention that it deserves. Hitchcock was kind of a lapsed Roman Catholic. He was raised Catholic in England, and he kind of fell away from it. But he would mention it every once in a while. He would give money to Catholic charities and things like that. So he never completely lost touch with the religion of his youth. And I think it influenced him in a lot of ways. I think it profoundly influenced, for example, his fascination with the idea of guilt and innocence, the idea that all good people have some bad stuff in them and they feel guilty about that. And all bad people probably have some good stuff in them too. This, I think, was something which he picked up from his religious training and just this religious thinking over the years. This idea that guilt and innocence, good and evil, are not completely separated from each other. So that's an example, I think, and again, a lot of times in a lot of movies, people deal with guilt and innocence all the time, and they deal with mistaken identities and things like that. But usually, it's a kind of a superficial way, and you have okay, that person, everybody thought he was guilty, and then he turned out to be innocent, or vice versa. But Hitchcock can complicate things and get into the nuances of these things in really, really profound ways. Before I mentioned his film of the middle 50s, The Wrong Man, where it's about Henry Fonda plays a man who is mistaken for somebody who really is a criminal. Henry Fonda is the opposite of a criminal. He's a really, really good man. And this is a bit of a spoiler, but hey, uh, this is a serious discussion we're having. The right man, the real criminal, is finally found while the wrong man, the guy who was unjustly accused, is praying. He is desperate. His wife is literally losing her mind over the strain this has put on the family. The family itself is kind of falling apart, and this poor guy who has been mistaken for a criminal and can't seem to get out of this no matter how hard he tries, and he has a trial and things go wrong, he's going to have another trial. Finally, his mother-in-law, his old Italian mother-in-law, tells him to pray for strength, and as he is praying, the image on the screen dissolves into a picture of the real criminal. And so it seems as if the prayer might have brought this about. On the other hand, maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it's just Hitchcock, storyteller, choosing this moment to show us who the right man is. But it's also not only possible, but I think likely that Hitchcock intended some real sort of spiritual message here. That sometimes if we submit ourselves to a higher power and admit that we ourselves can't solve all of our problems, you may actually get the strength and the help that you need.
We can't talk about Hitchcock without talking about the movie Psycho.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was it his last, I believe that was his last black and white film.
Yeah, yep, it
Yeah.
was, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and everything about the movie, the shower, the music, Norman Bates, the motel. Um, why does Psycho continue to work on audiences even though they know what's coming?
It's a good movie. That's one answer. I know when I show Hitchcock films to my students, Hitchcock goes over generally very well with today's college crowd. And always has, by the way. I've always shown in my teaching, shown Hitchcock movies. But Psycho is probably pretty much the favorite. They really, they love Vertigo. They love Rear Window, a few others. Well, Vertigo is a little slow for them sometimes. But anyway, they like other Hitchcock films. But Psycho is the one that really works. And I have to say, I have seen Psycho exactly 7 million times. I know what's going to happen. I saw it when it first came out back in 1960. I was pretty young, but I was around. And it still absolutely thrills me. And one of the reasons, I mean, there's more than one reason is that most of the acting is in it is absolutely amazing. Brilliant performances, especially by Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates, the psycho of the title. He is absolutely, it's just one of the great screen performances. Also, Janet Leigh. As the main female of the piece is also marvelous, and then secondary people like Vera Miles. John Gavin plays the other main male character, and he's very stiff. Hitchcock once called him the stiff, but he's perfect for that role because that role needed a stiff. So it really works up and down the line. That's one reason. Another reason, though, is just the incredibly interesting plotting of it. The way, and again, a bit of a spoiler here, but it's a really famous movie, so I don't think I'm giving too much away. The fact that the main female character, the main character in the whole first half of the movie, gets killed roughly
Yeah,
halfway through the film. Who would have expected that, especially back in 1960? Nobody thought the main character of any movie was going to get killed before the end, and maybe not then.
yes.
But there she was, gone halfway through the film, and another person takes over as the main character of the film. And it's just as smooth as can be. So it's a very surprising movie. And then you do have, just to jump to the set pieces, some really, really marvelous bits, especially the murder in the shower. And that is such a riveting scene with this and dozens of cuts from one shot to another within just almost a few seconds. And yet it's completely coherent. You have the impression that you're seeing everything because you're seeing this horrible knife murder of a naked woman in a shower. And yet actually you're seeing almost nothing because the shots are so partial and so quick. So anyway, it's just brilliant and it still really captivates people and engrosses people so much that, and this is something I always love pointing out about this movie, the shower murder gives way to another scene where the murderer, we don't yet know for sure that he's the murderer. We think he's the son of the murderer, cleans up after the murder. And it's a scene that goes on for several minutes of a man cleaning a bathroom. And
Mhm.
yet, audiences, including young people with their allegedly short attention spans, sit and watch this in fascination. So they watched it in fascination when I saw this at the Bayshore Theater in 1960, and they still watch it with fascination today, with my college students. So it's a movie that just contains stuff you just can never really get enough of.
Well, I tell you what, David Sterritt is the author of the Films of Alfred Hitchcock, revised and expanded. Thank David. I want to thank you for joining us on Lights Camera Author today.
A real pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And like you said, Hitchcock once said that suspense is not simply about what happens, it's about what the audience thinks might happen.
Right.
So, David, again, thank you. And until next time, I'm Jim Juno. Keep reading, keep watching, and keep discovering the stories behind the stories. This is Lights Camera Author.